one of the hardest hit areas, and currently there is a need for urgent intervention, especially in the area of housing and temporary housing solution for the residents. The response has been inadequate, delayed, and sometimes even in my mind. And I say this because one would expect that coming out of a hurricane of this magnitude, that having made landfall in the constituency, that would have seen mobilization of government ministries, departments, and agencies to that area, and intervention being made to deal with the issues confronting the people. I want to thank, though, members of the private sector, the private companies, private individuals, non-governmental organizations, including GEM Foundation, Samaritan's Purse, World Central Kitchen, Mercy Chefs. Had it not been for some of these groups, I don't know what would have happened to the residents of Eastern Westmoreland, because they have stepped in a big way to ensure that some of the things that are needed have been done thus far. We benefited from a visit of some of the CARICOM leaders, and President Ali out of Guyana committed to doing 200 roofs for some of the affected residents between Bluefields and White House. And in putting together the meeting, when the JDF and Ministry of Labour and ODPEM called the meeting, they said they wanted to welcome the 2 members of parliament, in which the government is inserting their political operatives in the response mechanism and bypassing, circumventing the elected officials. I represent all of the constituents of Eastern Westmoreland. I have absolutely no interest in how they voted. This is a humanitarian crisis. It is not a political matter. And as elected officials, we have to be involved and consulted in the process, because we know the communities, we know the areas, we know the people. Even in relation to the distribution of aid, to just have the JDF alone going into a community is not sufficient, because they won't know the lay of the land, they won't know the residents, and as such, that has left a lot of gaps. So I want to point out specifically some things now. Shelter. The shelters that are in the constituency, they have been inappropriate from the beginning, and they continue to be inappropriate. There isn't a bed or a cot or anything in any of the shelters. To be frank, there are persons that are not even aware that some of the shelters are still open with over 20 persons in each one of them. And that means if you're not aware, you couldn't possibly be making any provisions for the residents within those shelters. The persons who are in the shelters are obviously the most vulnerable. They don't have anywhere to stay, they don't have any relatives to stay with, and that's the reason why they are at the shelter. And I realize that the Ministry of Education has also taken on an initiative to reopen schools as soon as possible, which I support, because we want to decrease the learning loss. But in moving the persons from these shelters, majority of which are schools, so that school can reopen, certainly we can't just move them without making provision for them to stay elsewhere. In terms of emergency evacuation and shelter, housing of these persons, we have not seen any of those tents that are supposedly in the country that should be made available. I'm told that it was said in the Senate on Friday that tents went to Dayton Campbell, unless there is another Dayton Campbell that represents somewhere in Jamaica. It's certainly not this one. I have not been made aware of any tents. And I want to be on record as saying, I will never support moving out the persons out of the shelter unless we make provision for them. I will block it myself personally. That is inhumane, and we have to do better. So yes, we want the schools to open, but we must make adequate provision before we move the persons out of the shelters. We have in looking at how we respond to the housing crisis, there are still persons that are on the tarpaulin, still persons that are on a sheet of zinc. You still see mothers and children just on a sheet of zinc or on a piece of tarpaulin, right? There are still houses without tarpaulin that are yet to be covered. I have so far been told of allocations to the constituency, $3 million for cleaning in the prep work before the hurricane came. And that is after we made advocacy for some allocation, because initially we were told that Western Jamaica is not a priority and there was no allocation. Then there was an allocation of $1.5 million that was made twice, so that's another $3 million. That was to get care packages and tarpaulins. Now, if you get a care package and you put $5,000 worth of supplies in it, that would only get you 600 care packages for a constituency with over 40,000 persons. Then there's an allocation of $10 million for housing. And I've said it elsewhere that the Welcome to Montego Bay sign is $17 million. And we are given an allocation of $10 million in a constituency where 5,000 homes were totally destroyed. It is totally insufficient to meet the need that is there.
The reason we got so much damage in Hurricane Melissa with regards to our housing stock is the same land tenure issue. So because most people don't own the land, they tend to build temporary structures that can be moved if necessary. So most persons are afraid of building permanent structures because if the owner comes for the land, then they will have to leave. A lot of this land is government land, as was said by Dr. Campbell just now. And the government has to use this opportunity to create an environment where people can actually own that piece of land, where they can build permanent structures. We think about 10,000 persons or more were affected by Hurricane Melissa. And when I say affected, I mean total destruction plus damage to roofs, major damage I'm talking about. And as I said, this is because of the type of housing that we have in our constituency. And this is something we have to fix in the short and medium term as we move forward. The immediate needs of the constituency as we speak, we have been getting other assistance with regards to food, water, tarpaulins and stuff like that. But the need has really shifted to housing material, because every community we visit now to hand out food packages, people are asking the same question. When will the housing material grants start? When will people start seeing people getting material to fix their structures? So the need that we have now, which I think is the most immediate and short-term need now, is actually to get the materials in so persons can start rebuilding. Some persons have started on their own, family, friends, assisting, communities helping each other, but a lot of people are still there looking at each other, not knowing which angle to turn, not knowing where to do, because they really can't afford to start. And these are the people we have to look for. And I know the assessment is going on now, but there are thousands of residents who are just there wondering where the help will come from. And as I said, the government must step in here, because it will take the efforts of the government in a significant way for us to get people back on track to the lives they were living before Hurricane Melissa. When the helicopter went down in Landale and the members of the government in the area were called on to come because they were on spot before everybody else. I spoke of it, the Prime Minister dismissed what I said, but what I said was repeated twice since he spoke. And the most recent occurrence was this week, when at an activist, a known JLP activist premises, that was where the distribution was done. And we have to look at how we're doing these things. I don't know who came up with that idea, who thought this would look like a good idea to have the food packages being distributed from that location, but it was obviously a terrible idea. And we're saying that if you're going to be distributing any package at all, there is a representative in the constituency that you should contact and should assist with the coordination of these things. Whenever we are going out to do distribution, everybody we see in the communities, we give packages. We're not looking at who is PNP or JLP or no P. We're in a crisis situation and the government needs to act in that way. I get the feeling that the government still doesn't realize that we are in a crisis. But the crisis...
In a time like this, a very sensitive time when the most vulnerable are most at risk, we expect that that practice would ensure that there is collaboration between the government officials and the elected representatives to ensure that persons can benefit. In my constituency, I have had to sit and watch as persons approach me the day before a visit to ask me if I heard that the Minister of Local Government is coming into the constituency. What is it that they're coming to do? Where can they meet them? And I have no answer to the questions because I was not notified in advance. In my constituency, first, the Speaker of the House came, and perhaps she came in her capacity as an individual outside of the politics, but by her utterances, she made statements to suggest that she had visited communities, and every community that she visited, residents were not hopeful that they would get any assistance from me as the Member of Parliament. And I thought it was very unfortunate that in a time like this, we would seek to sow seeds of division and discord, because the Speaker of the House visited 3 communities, all strongholds of the Jamaica Labour Party. Not one PNP community was visited. Not one PNP community was given any of the care packages. In fact, the areas visited are well known: Rocky Hill, Santa Cruz, Burn Savannah, which is regarded by Edward Seaga as Little Tivoli. No reference was made to any other communities, but the Speaker formed the conclusion that every community she visited were not hopeful that they would get help to build back houses or do repairs. And I speak on that because she came into the community on Saturday morning, and by Saturday afternoon, the Minister of Local Government also visited the constituency. He distributed care packages, 60 to the sitting Jamaica Labour Party councillor, but I was not informed of his visit prior. The 3 other councillors who happened to be PNP councillors were also not informed of the Minister of Local Government's visit, and of course they got no packages from the minister. Only the JLP council received packages. And finally, the Minister of Justice came on Friday.